Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, Three Principles practitioner, Adey-Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading Three Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
I'm thrilled to have as my guest the amazing Dr. Linda Pettit. As a Three Principles teacher, mentor, practitioner, and soon-to-be author, Linda utilizes her 35-plus years as a psychologist with her 14-plus years sharing the principles to inform the spiritual nature of her work. In addition to the Healers Clinic, a mentoring program Linda and her husband, Dr. Bill Pettit, provide for Three Principles practitioners, Linda also offers 4-day intensives to individuals and couples who want to experience an in-depth exploration of the Three Principles. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're really busy, Linda, between writing and working and spending time with your grandchildren.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the usual question, I always like to know, how did you come across the principles?
About 3 months before I met Bill Pettit, a chance conversation in Parkersburg, West Virginia with a holistic healer occurred, and this person pointed me to the website of the Sydney Banks Initiative for Innate Health at West Virginia University. And I went on and I read some things and I listened, I think, possibly to a video that Bill Pettit and Judy Sedgman had up and was unimpressed and thought, this sounds like some neocognitive psychotherapy. I'm not interested. And that was it. And then 3 months later, I had been invited to present on the power of unconditional love and healing at a grand rounds at the university. And Bill came to that workshop. And after the workshop, he came up, introduced himself. We had a dinner date about 2 weeks later, and 6 months later, we were married.
Oh my goodness.
I'm
just laughing at the unimpressed part. Did you tell him that on your first date?
I probably played it a little closer to the vest. Yeah, I don't think I wanted to alienate Bill. So I kept my counsel and didn't say anything. Although eventually we had a lot of discussions about it. I think at that time in the Three Principles community, bear in mind this was in 2003, the sharing, at least from my point of view, seemed more cognitive and oriented to thought. And I was on a very active quest for a spiritual understanding that I could bring into psychotherapy. And so initially, I almost missed it.
Wow. That's really interesting. I didn't know that, because I know it's, it basically started off very much on the spiritual side with Sid. So that's interesting that it sort of, you saying in the early 2000s that it took more of a cognitive feel to it.
Yeah, and again, that's a matter of perception, although I have talked to Bill about it, and he, I think, agrees that as how he was presenting it at that point, it was more about the power of thought and the difference between the power of thought and the content of thought, and I think a very strong focus on, that we're creating life moment to moment from the inside out. But I don't know that I heard people use the word spiritual, and I don't know that I was at a place that I made that connection right away for myself. That took a while. I will also say that I was very sped up. I was busy. I've always prided myself on being a person who can get a lot done in a little period of time. I was a mother raising a daughter who had lost her father and was still grieving. She was very active in sports. I was moving around all the time. And I think that initially it was hard for me to hear, because I had come to accept that busyness was normal. It didn't feel pathological to me. I didn't feel like I was under a huge amount of stress. I was enjoying my life, but I don't know that I realized how much I was busy in my head. And Bill Pettit, my husband, who had known Sid for quite a few years by that time, encouraged me to watch Sid's videos, and I would turn on Sid's lovely videos, and within seconds I would be sound asleep. And I told Bill, that man has the most monotone voice. And he just puts me to sleep. If he was going to be a public speaker, he could at least turn it up a notch. No, not realizing that I was tired. Yeah. And that as I quieted down, my mind quieted, and I did what I needed to do. I slept. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, I know that you do amazing things with your husband, Bill. But I want to go back to a talk you did in London. I spoke to you afterwards because it touched me so much. And that's when you talk, because there's so much discussion in the world right now about, or rather in the three principles world, about non-duality and the principles and where they meet and where they don't. And you gave a talk about uniqueness and universality. And you shared a story in that about when you were in the graveyards in Poland, I think it was. And every time I see you, I say, will you please retell that story? But I think it so beautifully illustrates, how we're totally, well, you tell the story. I'm not going to preface it. I love it coming from you.
It's one of those things that you tell a story and then afterwards come back and think, what exactly did I say? But what I remember and what comes to me right now was that Bill and I were traveling around Poland, and we were looking for cemeteries where my relatives were buried, because all four of my grandparents emigrated from Poland. And I was struck that the cemeteries, the gravestones were big marble slabs over the bodies, and then they would have like a headstone. But on the graves, there were actually all of these beautiful lanterns. And I was struck by the fact that the light coming through the lanterns was refracted real differently, that it had its own beauty as it came through purple glass and amber glass and pinkish colored glass, and the effect of the light coming through all those beautiful glass colors and the shapes of the lantern was as beautiful as the light itself. And I knew I was about to give this talk on universality and uniqueness. And I thought that was just a really beautiful metaphor for the way I experience life. That yes, the beauty within, the spirit within, the commonality of mind coming through us is extraordinarily beautiful. And yet the unique shape it takes as different people think and form personalities and have different experiences, to me, is equally as beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. I really do. I think we were on a call this morning and I shared with you, I don't know if I can share it here, whether I should repeat what was said, but I love to embrace myself, the unique individuality that we all come to the table with, and not to overshadow that we are all obviously come from the same source. We are all connected. But equally so, I see that we're all unique and individuals, just like each little wave in the ocean is a unique little wave, not to be repeated, but all part of the same ocean. So I love that. So you're also going to be doing a talk at the Viva event, and that one's going to be about realizing the richness of life. I'd love to hear about what's coming up for that one.
Yeah, I don't know that we've talked a whole bunch about it.
Fresh in the moment. I love that.
and that is really true. I think Bill and I, largely when we're speaking at events, we try not to get a lot of thought about it, but just share what comes up in the moment. And of course that's fueled by the fact that a lot of times we have had discussions about it. But I am more and more, for myself, thinking about the metaphor of life as a love story. And I'm writing, that is the provisional title of the book that I'm writing, that that we originate in a relationship with the form. The formless takes on, or with the formless takes on a form. And it can be thought of as a relationship between two aspects of divinity. And I love exploring that in that way. It feels very rich. I often think about the fact that the last thing that I heard Sid Banks say, the man who discovered or uncovered the principles, the metaphor of mind, thought, and consciousness, that the last thing I ever heard him say was an answer in response to a question that a well-known three principles practitioner put to him. And she said, Sid, you know how much I think of you, and I love the understanding you've shared with us, and you know how I've devoted 30 years of my life to sharing it, but sometimes I find myself still asking, why are we here? What's the meaning? What's the purpose of life? And Sid as I recall it, got tearful and said, there's really only one reason, and that is to know love.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I just really resonate with that there's a reason for this human existence, that I took a form and I'm in a body that I have a partnership with. And that partnership with my body is what allows me to experience the psychological and physical side of creation. I think there's a place where Sydney Banks said the gift of consciousness is that while we're in consciousness, while we're conscious of the physical world, we can experience both the spiritual and the physical, and see the oneness of those two things. And so I love that I have a beautiful body to wander around this earth in and experience life, and to experience love, and to give love, and to know love. And to me, that's really beautiful.
Oh, that's so beautiful. You actually made me tear up a bit with that one. That was gorgeous. That's so beautiful.
I once read, Del, in a book, this little quote, the body is not baggage, it's the ticket.
Yeah.
And that kind of says it all for me, that while we're in it, it's the ticket to experience the full sensuality, the full range of the human psychological and spiritual experience.
That's so beautiful. Now, this is the book that you're in the midst of writing right now, the love story.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to read it. Sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more also about the mentoring program that you and Bill offer. It's the Healers Clinic. Is that what it is?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's a professional mentoring program for people who are helpers. So anyone who is in a role where they're trying to help others live more happy and contented lives by sharing the three principles understanding. Although, as we did the first Healers Clinic, what became clear to us is that what we were offering was an opportunity for healers to deepen their own understanding of the principles as they were described by Sydney Banks. So we do ground the program in the readings and videos of Sydney Banks, because, as Bill often says, if you want to know about the theory of relativity, you're probably better off served by going to Einstein than to going to the many pundits that have come after Einstein trying to explain what Einstein saw. And so we like to go back to that original work and look at it and share it and reflect on it with people. And our goal for the program is really that the practitioners on the program, hopefully by the end of it, can say, I'm enjoying more happiness and contentment in my life. In the Second Chance, there's a powerful passage that's one of the books by Sid Banks, the first one he wrote, where one of the protagonists asks the teacher, what's your definition of success? And the teacher says, well, that's really simple, happiness and contentment. And the protagonist said, is that all? And the teacher says, isn't that enough? And that to me is a correction to the great, what I call the great attribution error.
Yes.
In a lot of self-development and personal development in psychology, that there's this sort of sense that if you have certain things, you have, the best job or a family or a partner or a whatever, you will be happy. If you have a meaning, if you have purpose, you'll be happy. But actually, the correction that the three principles point to is that if you have happiness and contentment, the abundance of life flows from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that you can have happiness and contentment regardless of what your external circumstances look like. Because you're right, all the grasping, all the striving, I mean, it is the bottom line. Everybody is looking for happiness and contentment. They just think it's by acquiring things or acquiring relationships or the perfect relationship that's going to come to them.
Yeah.
It is that simple.
Yeah, and in our modern doing world, people often, when they hear those words, happiness and contentment, it often feels a little passive to them. So what? I'm just going to be laying around gazing at my navel, enjoying happiness and contentment.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I don't mind a little navel gazing from now and then. And the reality is that my creative inspirations, my productiveness, my sharing with my family comes much more easily and more beautifully in a more relaxed way when I'm coming from that place of happiness and contentment.
Yeah, that is so true. So you offer another program. I know it's on hold right now because you're finishing your book, but Life as Spiritual Theatre. I love that title. Unfortunately, you hold it on Tuesdays when I'm doing the show, because otherwise I've heard incredible things about it. So talk a bit about that, because you will be bringing that program back. Am I right?
Yeah, probably in an expanded way, actually. I'm looking at having Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. So sort of working with that life as spiritual theater metaphor. And really, I see that program as not about what I offer, but what the group of women, and it is a program for women, begins to surface from within the circle or the group together. I'm much more interested in what other people have to say than what I have to say, and what wisdom will come as we join together and sit together in collaboration and mutuality and reflect on what that means. And so I offer a sort of an outline for each particular call. So we have titles like responding to actors or exploring roles, or so we use the metaphor as a framework for exploring the three principles as Sid talked about them and what they mean practically to us as women.
Yeah. Did you have a background in, I know your background, did you have a background in theatre as well? I mean, you've done so many things in your life.
No, I truly didn't. And, and it was funny, but also typical as I live life, that I was floating around in my pool one afternoon in Arizona, and I was just thinking about, what was the most creative thing I think I've done in my career? And I went right away back to a time when I was working with women in the Mid-Ohio Valley area, and the initial topic was creativity. It went in a lot of different directions, but I loved that time, and I thought I want to do something with women again, and I want to do something that will sort of get the creative juices flowing. And I just had this thought that came out of nowhere that said, talk about life as spiritual theater. And I thought, spiritual theater? Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, really.
I wonder if Sid ever talked about life as spiritual theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came in and I started looking through the books, and sure enough, he had in 3 or 4 different places. So I started with not very much even appreciation myself for what that metaphor meant, and then it evolved as I worked with these lovely women. I think the program has run 3 or 4 times and has had 20 participants each time, and the women have been from all around the world, and it was just a really beautiful thing to sit with women from all around the world who brought their life concerns to the table, and together we looked at well what do the 3 principles, what does that understanding have to offer as a way of seeing what the answer is to this situation. And so it's really an in the moment kind of program.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think I'm so intrigued by the title, because I often used to sort of have this analogy for myself that, you know, when we're on stage is like being in the form. And yet when we've sort of, when our scene is over and we go into the wings, we sort of, we're back to our spiritual, like we all know each other, we're all a team, even if on the stage you're sort of the antagonist and the protagonist, and you're in this like sort of real struggle, when you go off into the wings, like you're all friends. And then you'll go for a drink afterwards at the local place or something after the night's, you know, the event is over. But it just feels like that sometimes to me, that we get on stage and we get so tangled into the drama, we forget who we are at our essence. But when we're in the wings, we remember who we are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Del, that's a great point. And where I really saw that, my stepdaughter Molly took Bill and I to an improvisational theater in Chicago, where a small group of men, maybe 4 to 6 actors, asked the audience in the beginning of the program for a name of a 2-act Shakespearean play. And people shout out names and they pick a name. And they said that it was not set up in any way. And then for the next hour and a half, they create a 2-act Shakespearean play, complete in Elizabethan language.
Wow.
So the words are all rhymed.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch it, and it's hysterical. It was so funny. I laughed so hard that night, my sides ached for days. But it was fascinating. They would be on, so like 4 would be on the stage, just coming up with the lines, and then 2 would step off and watch, and they would get another surge of inspiration, and then they would jump in, and then 2 more would step on and watch, and they would get a surge of inspiration. And I thought, well, that Sid had said that the beauty of life is that we are both participants and observers. Mm-hmm. That we're in life and we're doing it, but we also have this incredible gift and ability to step off and look at it, and the freedom to choose and create something different. Yeah. And someone in one of the classes said to me that one of the rules of improvisation is that you start everything internally with a yes and yes to what came before, and I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, that's a metaphor for life as well.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the book. I know you said it's the working title is Artists of Love, but I know that I'm assuming from what I've heard, now it's going to be a memoir as well. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a set of stories from my life and from some of my interactions with clients as a psychologist, of how mind manifested in different ways. So there are stories about dreams and visions and powerful, inspiring thoughts and sudden insights that were transformative in my own life and in the lives of the people that I worked with.
Yeah. Do you have one of those stories? I mean, I remember you sharing with me before a story about you couldn't believe the transformation that you saw in front of your eyes with somebody that had previously been catatonic, I think you shared.
Yeah. That's a little bit of a lengthy story. I don't know that I have the space and time to really give it justice right now. But it was for me, the message or meaning of the story was that I stepped out of everything I had ever been taught about what a therapist could or should do at a moment, and just went with something that came up from within me. And it didn't fit any theory that I had been taught about how to be helpful to people. And something really, really, really powerful happened for that individual. And afterwards, one of the most beautiful parts of the story was that I was really afraid that if I told my supervisor, because I was a trainee at the time, that if I told my supervisor what I had done, that I would be fired from my internship, and that I would be, castigated for what I had done, because I had really crossed the boundaries of psychology and spirituality in this particular situation. And I was very surprised when my supervisor said, I knew you would figure out what to do. You can never go wrong when you trust your inner wisdom.
Wow.
And so that was really beautiful. So the point of sharing that story in the book is really about the power of moving to a place of quiet and listening deeply to what is within, and knowing that touches the person that you're sitting with in a very powerful way.
That's beautiful. And now this supervisor wasn't a Three Principles supervisor. It was just...
Oh, no, this happened 30 years before I encountered the principles.
Yeah. And it just speaks to the fact, as we always say, the principles are in action whether we know about them or not. And clearly, that's what she was sharing with you, is to trust that guidance, that inner wisdom that comes through in the moment.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things in the book that I, as I look back, I see that the principles were operating perfectly. And the reason at times it felt like I was in the flow of something was that in those times I was just not up in my own head, embroiled and tangled in the content of my own thinking. And then at other times I was just, doing what humans do, but didn't know that was what was causing the sensation or experience of temporarily not being as closely aligned with or in harmony with the flow of guidance that I had experienced in my life from the time I was a very small child.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I know that you're a grandmother, and I'm just thinking how incredibly special that time is. I know everybody that I know that's becoming grandmothers now are like, I'm going to have to wait a bit. My children are nowhere near it. But with your children, your grandchildren, do you share the principles, or do you just live the principles and they're just getting it by osmosis?
Well, we have some older grandchildren. So our oldest granddaughter is in her early 20s, and she actually has a baby. So we're great grandparents. And she would certainly be aware that we share this understanding of the three principles, and has read a number of the books, and others of our grandchildren, when they've had some little glitches in life, as we all do, we've reached out and shared information. With the young ones, it's just a matter of living in the moment, living present to them, really, really present to them, and just trusting that the love you're in when you're quiet in your own head just speaks for itself.
Yeah. It's a beautiful legacy you're leaving for your family and your children. We're actually running out of time now, so I just wanted to say goodbye, and thank you for spending the time with me. I know you're off to the woods, aren't you, for some quiet time to do some writing?
That little writing time, right?
Yes. So enjoy your time there, and again, thank you. It's been so lovely to have you on the show.